everybody, Steven here, aka Too Slow for Yo, and this is going to be a tutorial on how to use the Final Cut Pro plugin called Optical Flow effectively and appropriately. So right here, I have a clip that I'm going to use to show the effects of Optical Flow, just regular kickflip or whatever. So basically what you want to do is you want to find the point of where you want the slow motion to start. Just wherever you want. I'll just go ahead and do it right here. And I'll do a test to show the effects of Final Cut Pro. And then I'll just cut it again there. So say I just want to slow this down 25% or something like that. It'll look pretty clear. It'll look like decent for regular slow motion. So it doesn't look too bad, honestly. It looks pretty nice. But if you want to slow it down even more, you can go ahead and do that. Go to 10%. And this is not Optical Flow. This is just the regular speed of the video that you're editing right here. And it's alright. It's like it's a little choppy. You can probably find a little balance in between, like 15%, and it'll be a nice equilibrium. But say you went down to did custom, if you want to go lower than 10%, and you did 4%, it gets pretty bad. And that's just because it's just basically playing frame by frame by frame. So this is where Optical Flow will come in. So basically, if you want to add on the effect of Optical Flow to a clip, you already have to be in a slowed down state of the video, or ramped up if it's normal speed, and you got on video quality to choose it right here. It's not going to be available on normal speed, so you have to slow it down first. And so you just want to go ahead and click Optical Flow. I don't use frame blending at all. It's basically just a Optical Flow, but all it does is blend the frames together. It doesn't stretch them out like Optical Flow, which is you just let that render a little bit. But Optical Flow, what it is basically just a plugin that takes each individual frame and stretches them out so that they will blend together well. And it'll give the illusion of the footage. It's like, oh wow, this looks really slowed down. You probably shot it on a high-speed camera. It's like, no, just edited it. And this is a great tool for people like me who can't afford a $5,000 to $10,000 high-speed camera. Those are great. They shoot fantastic footage at HD, incredible stuff that you can use. But it's like, I'm stuck with my good old camera that I got under $1,000, and I'm trying to do some cool high-speed or some cool slow motion. This is a great way to do that. Which I also wanted to point out. If you're gonna some advice for using Optical Flow, if you're gonna use Optical Flow in a clip and you already know that it's like you're getting ready to film something, you're like, oh, we're gonna do this in slow motion, and you're planning to use Optical Flow, make sure I highly recommend that you shoot at or above 60 frames per second. If you shoot lower, maybe 45 is, it's not really gonna work out too well for you if you're gonna try and do 4%. But if you go down to 23%, 23 frames per second, and you slowed it down 4%, the quality would decrease a lot of the video. Not the the HD quality, but just the overall quality of the slow motion. And that's because there's a bigger gap in between each frame when there's only 23 frames per second being shot, and so Optical Flow will have to work harder to seal the gap and mash the frames together. So basically, if you shot at 23 frames per second and you did something like this at 4%, it would definitely not look like this. See, if you look right here, this little arm movement, and it goes up to there, and then it goes back down. Just watch the arms. If you were doing this at 23 frames per second, it would almost look like a lagging, dissipating arm. So his arm would be here, and then as it moves down to here, you'd still see a little bit of the image of up here, and it would be it's kind of hard to explain. I don't really have 60 frame per second or lower than 60 frames per second footage, mainly because when I'm doing slow motion, I always try and shoot at 60 frames or 120. This is 120 on my GoPro. I wonder if I can, let's see here, maybe find some footage that has that. Alright, so I know for sure that this is 60 frames per second, and just to show you the distance, or the difference, sorry, in between 120 and 60 frames, you know, alright, so you got a little movement here. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then cut it again here, and then I'll also do 4%, slow that down, and then I'll add some optical flow to it. And well, you'll see in a second, if it says analyzing for optical flow, it's just rendering. Just wait a little bit for that to fill up, and you'll see a big difference in between 120 and 60. And so if you can see like all this little lag and kind of stuff like that, even with 60 frames per second, that's like pretty. It's like wow. That if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, I don't recommend going under 10%, slowing it down. I can slow it down to 4% because this is 120 frames per second. So I'll just go and play that. You know, it's like, oh, I got this cool slow motion, but each frame is it doesn't look good. So what you want to do if you're doing 10%, I mean if you're doing 60 frames per second, you know, 15% is pretty good. It's hard. It's hard to judge what percentage to use for when you're shooting at 60 frames, which is why I always try and shoot in 120. It's a lot easier. But also what you can do, if you saw the 4%, you can take like a little snippet. I've noticed this one thing that's pretty useful, just something that small, and then go down to 1%. And it gets to the point where it's not as much blurry movement, and that's because the footage is slowed down so much that there's not as much movement anyways. So there's not as much work as it has to do. Another reason why this doesn't look as good as this is because the more zoomed in you are, the more it will take up the screen, and the more optical flow will have to kind of compensate around and go around this huge section of movement, while here it's really not as much. So yeah, that's optical flow, and a couple of tips for filming. If you're gonna use optical flow, you want to make sure I don't really do a good job of this, but I know it does affect the video quality and how well optical flow will work on your footage. Try not to have as much camera movement. If you have camera movement a lot, optical flow will have to compensate for the corners to follow along and synchronize with the movement of the person. And then same thing with shadows, like here. There's barely a shadow. If you have a big shadow, not only is optical flow going to have to work around the movement of the regular person, but also the movement of the shadow. And with shadows, it's almost like you can see the blurriness a lot more than you can see it on a person, is what I've noticed over the experience I've had with optical flow. And then final tip is try and have a background that's like blue, or not blue, like the sky, or like a solid color. Because if you have, if you just have one color, and if you look right here, like right at the edge of his foot, you can kind of tell it's really blurred just because of the tree texture and the lighting. If you had just a blue background, you can't tell because there's different shades here, so you can tell the blurriness is a lot more evident in that than it is in the sky or something like that. So yeah, to sum it up, Optical Flow is a great program that I highly recommend. It's awesome because it's free. It comes with Final Cut Pro. You don't have to buy it like Twixtor on After Effects. Twixtor, if a lot of people compare the two, Twixtor has a little bit more functionality, and you can customize the settings and tweak them to your preference. You can't really do that for Optical Flow. It's like, but it works out great for me, so I'm not complaining. Always try and remember to shoot in a higher frame rate. That will definitely help out later on in editing. And the farther away the object is that's moving, the better the optical flow will look, is one thing that I've noticed. So if he was much closer here, because more of him is taking up more of the screen, optical flow would have to work more around the whole screen, so you could definitely see the blurriness. But since it's a little bit smaller away, and it's just around the feet and the skateboard and the arms, you can't the blurriness, you can totally see it, yes, but not to the regular onlooker. Like the first time they see it, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. But the more they look at it, and you can tell there's blurriness. But the farther away, the harder it is to notice the blurriness and the motion blur. Alright, well, that's how to use Optical Flow for Final Cut Pro and a couple of my tips. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I will definitely get back to you on them and do my best to help you figure out whatever is going on, or if you just need some more advice with it. Alright, well, too slow for yo, out.